From Saturday Night Live to Seinfeld to The Larry Sanders Show and Modern Family, one of America's most tireless Emmy-nominated comedy writers is Carol Leifer. As a stand-up comic, she's performed on all the biggest late-night shows, including The Tonight Show with Johnny Carson back in the day. Her upcoming book will be called How to Succeed in Business Without Really Crying. Carol Leifer is here. Working on Seinfeld, I mean, you came in the fifth season, when it was at its absolute apex, right? I mean, Seinfeld was pretty much the biggest show in the world in its fifth season.
You know, it was really kind of right on the cusp. I'm only thinking of that because I'm in New York, and I saw Bette Midler's play, who was in an episode of mine of Seinfeld called The Understudy.
Mm-hmm.
But people cannot believe when I tell this story that Bette Midler was like one of the only big stars who would do the show. Like, we went after a lot of big people, and they turned us down. So it was still...
It took time to build, but I feel like that was the season. I mean, you wrote the episode where Kramer becomes a ball boy at the US Open, and he runs into Monica Seles. These are absolutely... I feel like in my memory, I mean, I was only a teenager, but in my memory, those were the moments where I really felt that the show had hit big.
Yeah, it was a good season.
Yeah, what was that like, coming on board to that? Because you already knew Jerry, you knew Larry David prior to that?
I go so far back with Larry David and Jerry Seinfeld. They were the comedians who were the MCs at the comedy clubs I auditioned at and passed me on those auditions. So I go back with them like to literally my first day in show business. But you know what I loved about Seinfeld was it was all about the idea. And you went into pitch in that room, and it had to be something in 2 sentences that got them to go, yes, that's a show. You know, like I would go in and George lip reads his ex-girlfriend's lips from across the room with a deaf woman to find out why she broke up with him. You know what I mean? And Larry would leap up and go, that's a show. We're definitely doing that. That's a show. So you just had to kind of find what the small, funny thing was to create an episode around.
Did you get the sense that it was Larry's guiding hand primarily?
But you know what, Josh, that really is the beauty of Seinfeld, and I think the genius of it, because it was the combination, the synergy of Larry David and Jerry Seinfeld. And I always compare them to kind of like Lennon and McCartney, you know, with Larry David obviously being more of the John Lennon type, you know, and Jerry being that pop sensibility that McCartney has. Together, it just made it genius.
What was Jerry like as a guy when he was young and a comic?
You know, that's a really interesting question, because when I look back now on it, it's like Jerry was always really hardworking. He always had that work ethic. Like, this is going to sound funny, but when I was coming up as a comic, like all day we just, you know, mess around, and it didn't matter what you did, and just show up at the club at night for work. Like, Jerry every day in the middle of the day was like, I'm going to go home and write. Like, what? Yeah, I'm going to go home. He would sit down and make himself write. And he just always had that discipline and that work ethic that I think is so clear. It was obvious at, you know, at Seinfeld, because they worked so hard and so diligently on the scripts and making them the best shows ever. But even now, with working on his stand-up, you know, he writes every day.